Hi, everyone. Welcome. I think people are still trickling in, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us for today's program. My name is Namulin Bayer-Sehan, and I am the Education Director at the Aldridge Contemporary Art Museum. The Aldridge is located on the ancestral homelands of the Wappinger and Munsee Lenape peoples, a place known as Ridgefield, Connecticut today. We are a non-collecting institution, and we present new exhibitions by emerging artists, established artists, and thematic group exhibitions throughout the year. I'm really delighted to introduce our speakers who will be in a conversation today about Loie Hollowell's exhibition. Artist Loie Hollowell was born in 1983 and raised in Woodland, California. She received her BFA at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and an MFA in painting from the Virginia Commonwealth University in 2012. She currently lives and works in New York City and is represented by Pace Gallery and Jessica Silverman Gallery. She has been exhibited in galleries and museums all over the world, and joining Loie in conversation is our Chief Curator at the Aldridge, Amy Smith-Stewart. Amy has organized the exhibition Loie Hollowell, Space Between, a survey of 10 years, which is currently on view at the Aldridge through August 11th, 2024. In response to Loie's exhibition, we will be presenting Gossip, which is a new performance commissioned by the museum that is choreographed and presented by artist Alexa West. This performance will take place twice at the Aldridge on Saturday, June 22nd at 2 and 4 p.m. Please join us in person for this special event. And this conversation, as you can see, is accompanied by a slideshow of installation images of the exhibition. We will be holding an audience Q&A at the end of the conversation, so if you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Amy, my colleague, who will be introducing more about the exhibition.
Hi, Namulin. Hi, Loie. So happy to be here tonight with all of you. I'm going to quickly do an introduction on the exhibition, and then we're going to dive in. I have a series of questions for Loie that we'll be exploring tonight. So this exhibition is Loie's first museum survey and includes paintings and works on paper that you see here in this slideshow that are made over a decade. The debut of new pastel drawings and paintings that incorporate live casts of pregnant breasts and bellies, as well as never before exhibited works on paper from Loie's personal archive. The exhibition tracks the development of Loie's visual language over 10 years, a vocabulary that bridges abstraction with figuration, autobiography with art history, and biology with emotion, orbiting 2 centuries of pioneering women artists who span generations and movements, from abstraction to surrealism to the 1960s light and space art movement. Hollowell also cites neo-tantric painting as important influence. Her approach always begins with her own body as a guide to appraise seismic social issues, from sexual freedom to feminism, reproductive justice to motherhood. This survey's focus considers time as material and theme. Hollowell turns the body into a metaphorical clock, documenting extreme intervals of change through dramatic chiaroscuro, saturated color, and charged light. Her labor-intensive process begins with a pastel drawing. Her compositions are then built with geometric and biomorphic forms, evocative of bellies, breasts, vulva, and buttocks, or life casts that abstract the physical and emotional transformations she has experienced through conception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, with her 2 children. Her paintings are endowed with dimensional relief, achieved by adhering CNC milled high-density foam or cast resin appendages to the surfaces to impersonate fleshy bulges and curves. These protrusions, which vary in depth, soften the work's rigid 2-dimensionality and evade the line between painting and sculpture to confront the viewer with a visceral beauty. She uses a palette that glows, throbs, and blazes, a luminescent progression of reds, blues, yellows, oranges, greens, pinks, and purples that show off a mercurial tempo from tender to explosive. Applying a rigorous symmetry and reference to the body, she choreographs the energies and emotions that come from the mental and corporal, with an emphasis, she says, on the birthing body, the epicenter of the universe. So with that, I think we can dive in. Loie, I'm excited to be in conversation with you tonight. I'm going to start from, I think, the very, very beginning, because I'm always interested in knowing the, kind of the origin story. So when did you know you wanted to be an artist, and can you recall your earliest inspiration?
Well, Amy, I always love talking to you. Let's see, my earliest inspiration was my upbringing. Both my parents are artists. My dad is a painter. He was a professor at UC Davis for all of my childhood and teenage into, I think he retired 10 years ago, maybe more. And my mom is a graphic designer, cartoonist, seamstress. She kind of does it all. And so, yeah, I just grew up around creative people in Northern California. I got to meet the other professors at UC Davis, like Roy DeForest and Robert Arneson and all these kind of funk artists from that time in the 80s, and Wayne Thiebaud. So I just had this like plethora of painterly influences, and I started painting, I think, when I was like 7 or 8. My dad gave me my own studio in a closet in our house, gave me all his old paints and some brushes, and I started making paintings of my favorite dog, Lucy. And that's kind of the earliest memory I have of painting.
Oh, wow, your dog. What kind of dog?
He was very, very overweight Labrador. She used to sit under the table and eat the scraps and fart.
Oh my God.
He would all just be like, "Oh, Lucy, no."
Do your parents still have it?
They sent it to me. I should hang it up. It's in the basement. It looks like a 7-year-old or 8-year-old painted it, but yeah, it was painted with love.
Did you ever collaborate with your father on anything when you were younger? During he's such a renowned painter himself.
He wanted me to help late after I was done with undergrad. I went back home, Felix. I went back home to kind of work in this big open room at their house with a friend of mine. We had this as our studio space after undergrad, and he tried to like get me to work for him, and it never would have worked. I you know what I mean? Like he couldn't be my father and my employer. I wouldn't have, like, he would try to coerce me into helping him. I just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I actually can't imagine working for my father.
Can you imagine working for your dad in that way? Yeah.
No, but I think it's kind of amazing that your father is a painter, and that you decided to be an artist yourself, because I know with my own kids, they want nothing to do with what I do growing up.
Well, I didn't want to be a painter. Like, I went to undergrad as a sculptor, and I was a seamstress. So I was more inspired by my mom and her seamstress abilities. She taught me to sew in 3rd grade. And so I was just making like really funky sculptural dresses. And then I used those to apply to CCAC at the time. It's now CCA. California College of Arts. And I got a full ride in there for fashion design, but I ended up deciding to go to a UC school, UC Santa Barbara, so that I could do a multidisciplinary kind of art, sculpture, performance stuff. So I was just like super influenced by Anna Mendieta and Carolee why am I blanking? Carolee Tiemann. And sorry. I was obsessed with that piece. Like, she's pulling the scroll out of her vagina. And so I went to school wanting to kind of turn fashion design stuff into sculptural performance things. And I did that for the first 2 years. And then my last 2 years of school there, I started painting. And
do you have any of the works from that period anymore?
No. I did for a while at my parents' house, and they just were thrown in like a garage, and it's just been infested with rats and everything's eaten. And I don't care. I don't actually, you know what? No, I don't have anything from that time period.
But you were walking around campus in these dresses that you were making.
In those dresses, they did find one recently that they had thrown into an RV that was left on the property that they used to drive around in, and it was covered in rat baby nests.
Oh my God.
So there were some holes in it, but I still have this dress. So I do have one of the dresses from that time period, but none of the paintings survived. But yeah, so there was a dress that I made. It was for 3 women. It was a kind of like a Baroque style, no, more Marie Antoinette style bodice dress.
Oh,
and
wow.
all 3 of us had the same dress, but the big hoop, the dress itself, the skirt was connected. So it was a huge triangle. It was like maybe 10 feet, a 10-foot triangle. And we were all at each point of this triangle. And then I would have, I don't know what it meant. I don't know what I meant. I was trying to make commentary about women being constricted by fashion and like getting our freedom. And so I had friends like get naked and hang out underneath us, like holding up we're like the pillars of holding up the freedom of women to wear whatever they want to wear. It was very like, 18-year-old visions of feminism.
What was it made out of?
Silk.
Wow. I see. I pictured
thick silk.
I was picturing an entirely different kind of performative dress, because I was imagining something that also had multiple breasts. I don't know why I was thinking there were body parts on this dress.
One of my performances was, a shirt, a stretchy shirt that I put water balloons in filled with paint. And so I had little holes cut out of it because I have a tit complex because my breasts are so small. So I had these huge fake tits and they were filled with paint. And I was painting on, I just poked little holes in them. And then I would just squeeze them around on the canvas and was painting with my balloon boobs.
That's hilarious. It's kind of like your own take on, Eve Klein, who was using women as living.
Exactly.
Wow. So how did you go from doing that to then making paintings?
It was a very conscious decision in the realization that I was going to have no money when I was done with school. And I was going to have to move back to Northern California, middle of nowhere farming town, and no one was going to be interested in my performances. So it's like, I have to figure out how to make some art that's interesting to me, that keeps my mind moving and engaged, but that can be portable and, not take up a lot of space and just kind of deal with the community that I was going to have, which was my dad as an artist. I was like losing all of my hip art school friends and moving back home to middle of nowhere. And I was like, well, I can have it. I think there's something here to painting. I think I can have the same kind of conversations about feminism and my body and my interests in the changes of my body within painting. And that's a conversation I can have for myself internally and with my friends through, sending each other pictures. But the conversation about painting really has to happen in person with a teacher. How do I use color? How do I create form, texture, light, space? And that's what I knew, that my dad knew how to talk about that. I mean, there were students who still reach out to him to this day. They're like, oh, you taught me so much about light and space and color and painting and what form is. So I knew that he could do that for me. So I went home just kind of with the intention of kind of trying to learn whatever I could from him as a student.
And this was after Santa Barbara. So after Santa Barbara, you went back home. And then when did you decide to move then you moved to New York?
I was there
Why
for
did you move to New York
5 years.
4 or 5.
I was there for 5 years. Yeah.
Studying under your father.
Kind of studying under my father. Yeah, it was me and a friend, Andrew Michelson, who's also done a performance at the Aldrich.
Oh my God, you were with wow.
Yeah, Andrew and I took over this like barn space that my dad had planned to make this big painting in, but he hadn't started it yet. So he let us use it. And he would come in and give us kind of critiques. And she was painting at the time and making these really beautiful kind of meditative process-based paintings. And he would come in and critique us. And yeah, it was good. Yeah. I mean, both of our works were much different than they are now, but we were both substitute teaching. I think Andrew was substitute teaching. She might've been doing something else, but I was substitute teaching to make money, saving it up so that we could leave. And then after like 4 or 5 years, we had enough and we left.
Did you both move to New York at the same time?
We drove across the country together. Yeah.
Why did you, I was always curious. First of all, I did not know this story. I really love this story. I was curious, why did you decide New York versus LA?
Well, I went to school in Santa Barbara and I spent time in LA. I don't know. It was like it was a known thing. Like I knew what that would be. I knew what LA
year. This is like
2006.
Oh yeah.
In between 6 and 7. Yeah. This is when we were moving. Actually, our question was between London and New York.
Really?
Yeah. We were trying to decide whether to go abroad or to go to New York. I think it was because we really felt even at that time, LA didn't have the kind of hip factor that it has now. Like it was still kind of associated with like the light and space people. There was a lot happening, but as an undergrad, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about all that kind of stuff that was brewing in LA. And for some reason, New York had an appeal because my dad was from New York State, upstate. So I'd been there with him because he also showed there. So I would go up to visit his family, and then we'd go to LA. I'd go to New York City. But there was something about New York and the rejection he had from New York because they stopped selling his work at the gallery in the city in New York City. And he had such a very like big kind of, not chip on his shoulder, but he was like, this place, it's just not, it kind of takes, and
Right.
there was something like wanting to contradict that and like make that assessment for myself. And also, it was a community decision. Like that's where Andrew wanted to go. And we also went with a friend, Iris, who's a poet, who still lives in New York. So the three of us, we were all lived together for, we moved there, we lived together there. That was kind of the community decision.
And you got, I know that you worked as an art installer. Did Anders,
Andrew came and she started working for Pierogi. Do you remember Pierogi was in Williamsburg?
Oh yeah, I lived in Williamsburg in the mid-90s. I remember. Yep. Yeah.
So she worked for Pierogi. Iris worked for a publishing company, and I continued to substitute teach at the public schools here. So you could teach at the charter schools. So I would go around and sub at charter schools. Until that zapped all the energy out of me. And then I started nannying. And then I started handling.
And working at night. And then you were working, you didn't have a studio per se. Were you working out of the apartment you guys were sharing, or was it a live work?
Yeah, I came into this situation with the least amount of money. So I took the basement. I took the basement of a space that flooded regularly.
Oh, God.
And I was so sick after the first year that I just took a hammer to the wall and started pulling the walls off. And there was black mold
Oh,
in
my
the
God.
whole basement that I'd been working and living in.
Where was this, Loie? Which area?
Bushwick.
Bushwick.
In 2007. It
So,
was so dangerous. I mean, I was so sick. And so so we did destroy the apartment before we left. We were so mad.
would be
I
too.
also gave them bed bugs. I had a boyfriend who came over and brought a bag of clothes full of bed bugs, and they
Oh, my
infested the
God.
apartment.
Oh, God. Well, I feel sorry for you too, because this is a big ordeal, but I guess if you move out, you're in kind of
Yeah,
leave behind.
it was bad. Yeah.
So at that time, because you didn't leave for VCU until what, like 2012?
2010.
And so what was the work like that you were making that you used to apply to VCU with?
I was making washi ink paintings, black and white ink paintings that were portraits of me and my partner at the time, and me, like women doing kind of lackadaisical things. They're kind of like morose and drippy. They're a little like Marlene Dumas
Yeah.
paintings, but without like inky, without color. I was really obsessed with Marlene Dumas at the time. And yeah, that's what I played with. I wasn't oil paint. I couldn't oil paint because I didn't have a studio that had ventilation. I never had like I was doing watercolor my whole time. I was in New York City before I went to grad school.
Wow.
And I wasn't drawing. I was just, using watercolor as a drawing material.
I don't think I knew that. I had no idea that for some reason I thought you were making small paintings at that time. So you applied to VCU with watercolors. Huh.
And some of them were big, big on a big roll.
Well, Marlene Dumas was I think, there was a lot of, I even think there must have been an exhibition during that time when you were in New York too.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember seeing anything or, meeting any art? Like, was anything during that initial first, really, when you were really young in New York, do you remember anything being quite impactful or maybe kind of inspiring you in any way or changing a direction?
I had a connection when I first came here with one of my dad's ex-students. Her name is Amy Lincoln. And she's a painter that shows at
Sprony
Westwater now. So I've known her since I was 16 because she came in to study at UC Davis when I was 16. She's that much older. She's 2 years older than me. So I had a connection here. So when I got here, she introduced me to different artists, Bushwick artists, and her now husband were running a kind of an artist run space in Bushwick. So I would they would let me show my watercolors there. And that was a really huge lifeline because I didn't have any connection to any other artistic community.
What was the name of their space?
I totally forget. I don't know. There was another space that I was then connected to them called Camel Art Space. I don't think their space had a name because it was just like, it was a live work space.
Right.
And it literally like have shows in their bedrooms.
In Bushwick.
In Bushwick, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to remember because I feel like around this time I was at PS1 and there were a lot of, I remember there being a number of spaces in Williamsburg, also Greenpoint that were out of their apartments and things like that.
There was another one called Camel Art Space that was in Bushwick. It's thank God, hopefully been torn apart on the inside and reconstructed, because at one point during a show, kittens started falling out of windows on the third, fourth floor. Yeah, there were like kittens coming out of an open window because someone up there had so many cats that they were just breeding, and the window must have been open at some point. It was so hot. And I mean, who knows what was going on, but there are cats falling out of windows. It was,
Luckily they land well, so.
no, they were splatting on the ground.
Oh my God. Oh my
Yeah.
God. What a memory. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There were I have other things happen in Bushwick where people falling off buildings. I mean, Bushwick was so crazy.
Wow. So when you left that apartment, did you then go to Richmond, or were you?
No, I stayed in Bushwick. I then moved into a different place, stayed in Bushwick, then met someone, lived with them in Harlem for a while. And then from Harlem went to Richmond. And then after that moved to Queens and have basically lived in Queens ever since.
What I was curious with VCU, was there any particular professors or peers there that you're still in touch with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
My I would say part of my success now is due to this professor who came through that was working with the undergrads. He was a visiting artist named Ridley Howard. His wife is Holly Coulis, both amazing painters. Ridley shows with Lauren Marinero in the city. And he kind of knew of my work that I was making in grad school. And then when I got out of grad school, I ran into him in Chelsea. And he was just the kind of guy that would just wanted to be in touch with artists and wanted to go to their studios. He's just a social guy. So he came to my studio one day and offered and was running a space called 106 Green in Greenpoint with his wife, with Holly and his friend Mitchell. And they put me in a show there, which got a New York Times review, which then kind of set the ball rolling for other people to be interested. And that connection was made through VCU. And then apart from that, like people from my class, in the class behind me, but the kind of our group of friends, Amanda Baldwin, she's a showing painter right now. Veronica Pasova, she shows at Simone Saboul. She was with me there.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. One of my favorite sculptors, Sasha Ingbar. Yeah, she was there at the same time. And yeah, it was just like a really strong group of like women painters and sculptors. Melanie McLean, who's in Mexico City right now. She was there at the same time. Yeah, we were just like a really hardworking group of people, and we all like came out like determined to keep making our work. Ander also was with me in grad school.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea. We went to
undergrad together and we went to grad school together.
I had no idea that connection stretched that far. Wow. Yeah. So when you were in graduate school at VCU, that's what is that? Well, I guess you were probably using oil paint when you were working kind of apprenticing.
In grad school, yeah.
And then in grad school, because that's when, okay.
Yeah, so I had to stop oil painting when I got to the city. And then as soon as I got to grad school, I was still doing some ink-based stuff and then really quickly started painting with oil.
I can't see you working in ink because it's so loose, and I don't see any of your work as loose. So I would love, if you ever had any of those, I'd be so curious to see what they look like. Although I have a kind of idea in my mind, but like working in watercolor with ink on paper, it just, you know, with that looseness, it just, you have such, and we're going to talk about that, just the way that you have such a labor intensive and controlled process that and it's so layered,
Mhm.
you know, the watercolor, it would be so interesting to see those.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't keep doing that because I didn't, you know, these things, I wouldn't say it's hereditary, but it's a learned behavior watching my dad. He
Right,
spends 2 years on a painting. He
right.
builds up color very slowly, and color is super specific, and as is texture and process. So I think it just kind of, the more I worked that into my practice in grad school, the kind of more comfortable I got in the studio. Kind of found my voice as a mark maker that way. And yeah, I think there was something too easy about the kind of quickness of a mark that I
Right.
was getting with ink. You know, I think that's like a whole nother conversation that's really interesting. But for me, it was too easy.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess like also, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but I would imagine it would be frustrating because as you really build with color, so it would be limiting, I would say, in a way,
Yeah.
because it's so immediate.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah.
I think the color kind of obsession came, yeah, with oil painting and really with pastel. Like once I
Yeah.
started pastel studies, I started kind of being more obsessed with having a true relationship, finding the true relationship between the pastel and the painting. Whereas before that, I was making, yeah.
Yeah, I think I know the answer to this. I think the exhibition kind of, if our viewers have seen the exhibition, they will probably know the answer to this question too. But could you just talk about when you decided to kind of center your work on yourself and on your body?
Yeah, I mean, in grad school, I was making self-portraits kind of in a Henri Rousseau style, but I was the person, I wasn't him painting a woman, I was the woman. And they were kind of cartoony, you know, portraits of myself in different kind of landscape environments. And they were very kind of, I don't know, they were a little didactic. And then when I, you know, after grad school, found out I was pregnant when I was at a residency in upstate New York. And thankfully I was able to go to the Planned Parenthood like right away, knew I didn't want to was not ready to have a baby. But I think that experience, because the kind of emotional relationship with you know, my partner at the time was just so kind of intense. It was such a, you know, it was like a conversation, but I knew where I knew what I wanted. And then the physical aspect of it, I decided to have a medical abortion, you know, where they're actually like, you're not taking a pill, they're sucking everything out. And I think that was such kind of a intense experience. And at the same time, they put in an IUD. So it was just like all this stuff was happening in my uterus all at once. And I started making the two drawings, graphite and charcoal drawings that are in our show were those first experiments with like, how do I draw my vagina, and how does my vagina feel, and how does my uterus feel? And it kind of just like started from there. And I wasn't like I was consciously doing that, but I wasn't saying that's what the work was about. You know, I don't think when Ridley Howard came to my studio and saw those, I was like, these are from my abortion, as, you know, presenting them as kind of like figurative abstractions. But, you know, abortion is kind of obviously come front and center in politics right now. So it's been nice to be able to talk about them through that like honest lens.
And, you know, I think another thing that clearly one can see through the progression of the exhibition, and one of the reasons for doing the survey was just also to talk about your innovation with the surfaces, and this idea of kind of disrupting the flat kind of planar surface of a panel or a canvas. And I've always been a little curious, like, because you first started experimenting with sawdust, and then you moved into foam, and then CNC mill foam, and now the casts of the breasts and the bellies. But how did you decide to make that transition from working in, you know, a kind of realist style on the surface of just like making paintings, to then wanting to create some kind of depth?
It was moving from the pastels to the paintings. I wanted there to be a very distinctive jump visually between that mark making and the painting. So I tried a few different things, and actually my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, kind of suggested, he's a sculptor. So he kind of like proposed, because I was like, I want to make this color here, this red, sparkle and be a little more bright than just having it be painted, you know, just flat with a brush. And he brought all these different like sponges, sea coral sponges and things to my studio. And finally I settled on just the scouring side of a sponge, the green side of a sponge, and started putting on the paint, like putting it on with the palette really thick, and then sponging it to blend it instead of blending it with the brush, like blending it with the sponge. And it gave that like sparkle effect. And so that was one thing that I started doing. And then it kind of made me want more. Like, what else could I do to have the physical light that's in the space kind of lighting my work, enhance the painting space, enhance the oil paint. And so on this same painting where I had done a lot of sponging, I found some, you know, just got some sawdust. This was in an artist space, so people were chopping things and throwing bags of sawdust out in the hall. So I just went and got some sawdust and put it into some gel medium and started like sticking it onto the surface and trying to sculpt it. And it was on, at first it was on the form of a little mandorla. The mandorla was tiny. It was, you know, very tiny little mandorla that I built up, because I wanted to try and have that be the bright, kind of even brighter, like have the sparkly shimmer of the textured sponge paint, and then have this like bright sculpted little gem in the middle. And that was going to be my vagina, this mandorla. That was going to symbolize my vagina. But I wanted it to be like a gem, you know, like on a ring, like a little sparkly little jewel. And so that was the first instance where I started, you know, sculpting it up. It was just this one little area. And because my husband is like a materials obsessive, kind of archival, needs to be archival, make sure what you're doing is not going to fall apart, he kind of came in and suggested trying to do it with foam. And he said, this will go a lot faster if you sculpt it and then glue it on. So that's what I started doing with the foam. And that's what I've done basically ever since, is just sculpt it and then glue it on and make it all smooth and paint on it.
I know, because one thing, and I told you this, and I've told this to many people, but it was kind of remarkable when I entered one of the galleries and we had no lights. We took all the fixtures down. This is what we do when we install exhibitions. Start from a clean slate, and the paintings were just leaning against the walls, and they glowed without any light on them.
Yeah, right. Because you were seeing them as sculptures.
It was an amazing, and I just think it's such a brilliant idea, because as we all know, painting is one art form that is heavily commodified, and you know, people look and acquire art now based on images, but your work completely disrupts that, because people don't have any sense. I mean, here we have many details. You're looking at one painting right now, that you can see the details and you can see the kind of depth, which, like this painting comes off at the surface up to 8 inches. But you told me a funny story once that someone came to the studio and they had acquired a work and they had no idea that what they had acquired
They
had any depth.
recently resold that work.
But
they didn't know.
I mean, I
know.
also think that's, again, maybe your first inspiration in a way, which, was your father and his use of light and art and the way that he created light on his surfaces. But also you've talked a lot about light and space artists. Obviously you grew up in Northern California, with a specific kind of light. And, I kind of feel like it's also about wanting people to experience these paintings in real time and
yes,
have
and
a really slow experience and
yeah,
walk
and
around them.
that's how I entered the space of being in the world of painting, is watching the slow development of my dad's work and then realizing that you had to see it in person. He's a pointillist. He's like a Seurat, but like even more detailed than Seurat. So you have to like go and see, like, holy crap, this whole image like depixelizes as you get close to it. His paintings do. You never know that buying it from a photograph, buying it from an image, or seeing it in an image. And then also just being obsessed with Robert Irwin. I mean, I was obsessed with Robert Irwin in undergrad, and you have to see those things in person. And he does that, like, that's like such a decisive move on his part as an artist. Like, these are experiential works. I have no interest in talking about them unless you're looking at them, and I think that's kind of, I brought that maybe orneriness into my practice by making it sculptural, being like, oh, you sure, buy it. Yeah. You like the image? Great, buy it. And then you go and see it in person and it's a totally different painting. That's you're bad for not actually seeing it in person. Not you're bad, but like, sorry, in the case of the person that didn't know it was built up, like, that's the work of, I'm giving you something. As an artist, I'm giving something to the viewer if they take the time to see it in person. You're getting more out of it than just looking at it on your phone.
Well, and that's also your interest in light. I remember you were explaining to me that, because it has depth, you have areas that are absorbing light and areas that are creating their own light because of their casting, because the kind of surfaces are built up in a way that they cast their own light and shadow.
Yeah. Yeah, because color is reflective. The paint color is reflective. So if you're have on a horizontal area on the flat canvas, here is red, right here, it's going to shine, it's going to glow a little bit red because the paint here is red, so the light's going to, whatever. I'm just playing with like actual, what light does when it hits color.
But I also think it works so well conceptually with the content, because it is about your body and it is physical. So now you're kind of, softening, the surfaces or adding dimensions that mimic the body. So you have a much more physical relationship with the paintings, but also on a conceptual level, it works so well. And the scale of the paintings, also relate to your body. Like, I remember the Plumb Line series, those are about the height of your body when you're standing.
Yeah, I was really interested in being able to like move them with my arms.
Right.
Right now I'm making 8-foot by 6-foot paintings. Wow. We just had some people moving them today. It took 5 people to move them because I've built up the surfaces in such a way that they weigh like 150 pounds. And I don't think I'm going to be doing that again, but I wanted to I'm interested in this next body of work, creating experience that's like larger than the body, that you kind of get like sucked into. rather than having like a direct relationship with your own body, kind of having it more atmospheric and all over. And,
those works are based on one of the drawings in the show, right, Loie?
yes, after effect. Overview effect.
Overview effect. Can you talk, because I also think it's interesting because some of the works in the exhibition, as you can see, are more like here, kind of are evocative of almost pure abstraction, and then others are more figurative, or like in the case of 8 centimeters dilated, they're clearly referential. You clearly know what their references are. Talk about this new body of work that you're making, because I think that comes from the same space of thinking about being a mother, thinking about that experience, and thinking about the experience of labor, but in the output is much more abstract. What we're seeing is way more abstracted.
Right. Okay, I'll try to answer quick because I see we're coming up on time. But I think just for my own sanity, I oscillate between kind of a need to create a real figurative element that's directly referential to my body. Like here are depictions of my nipple, to then going into a more abstract, open-ended image that can be just a little more openly interpreted as many things. And I need those polarities to stay sane. And I was making all these belly paintings and tit paintings for the past like 3 years. And I think at this point, I've processed a lot of that emotional space that I needed to process with that work. And I'm at this place where I'm thinking more openly about parenthood. And
there's like, overview effects. Sorry.
There's overview. Yeah. So this is that's going to be an 8-foot painting. And so I was kind of thinking about how I'm looking down on my life now. I have enough space from that experience of giving birth. It was so intense and like revolutionary and traumatic and all these words. But I've been given enough space now that I can look at it from above. And it kind of got me thinking about that idea of the overview effect that astronauts have when they go into space and they look back down on Earth and they have this like out of body experience. And so whatever, just I can make meaning to it. I don't know if it needs to be there. The 2 circles, one is like me looking at myself from above, one is me in my body. It's kind of referential to of like the birthing pool that I gave birth in with my second, these kind of ripples of water coming out, and just again the sculptural element of that painting. These paintings too are very important. One of the circles is going in, is a convex, is a concave, coming out, a concave circle, and the other one is a convex space that's actually going into the panel. And it's a really, really subtle illusion. You have to see them in person to get to see what's happening, because they just look like 2 circles and a mandorla. Sorry. This is something I'm working on. I'm composing my needs about these paintings right now. So I don't have it like fully flushed out, but yes, it has to do with me stepping away and thinking about the experience in a way more abstract way. The birthing experience in a way more abstract way.
These new paintings, where can people expect to see them?
They're going to be in LA. They're going to be at Pace Gallery in LA in November.
Oh, I can't. Yeah, that's excellent.
And we'll have to work, with the photographer to get like a good side view, because you really have to get in tight to see how the surface undulates in and out.
I know this is the challenge, because we're making a book right now for Loie's exhibition, and we're choosing very specifically details so that people, when they see work in reproduction, they can still get a sense of
hard
the depth that comes, the way that these elements come off the surface, but also all these extraordinary painterly techniques and effects that you're using as well. But it's tricky.
Yeah.
I think I have so many more questions, but I think, Namulan, we should open it up to the audience, right?
Yes, thank you so much, both of you. Loie, thank you for your openness and honesty. It really comes through your work, and I really appreciate hearing more through this talk. We have a couple questions from our audience. One of them is, Loie, how do you keep the motivation going even when you don't feel like painting?
Well, I'm in that spot right now. Um, I don't know. I'm so tired right now. Um, I think again, this is a learned habit from my dad, but I mean, this sounds really bad, but I just push through. Honestly, I try to just push through, and by like halfway through the day, I like start getting into it. I'm like, okay, yeah, I see what's happening here. I can build on this. And then by the end of the day, I'm pretty happy. But it's like exercising. It's like running. Like I'm sure most runners like actually hate running, but they actually love the feeling of like what running gives them. And I feel like it's that, it's like exercising. You just kind of do it. And by the end of it, you're like that. I feel good. I feel better that I pushed through this hard time.
Yeah. And Holly is asking if you would consider making sculpture that's off the wall.
Yes. My husband and I actually made a birthing bench for the exhibition that just came down at Pace in New York City. That was a really fun sculptural collaboration. I've made a few with my husband, a few kind of little maquette sculptures that we just haven't quite figured out how to put into production.
Mm.
I've made little sculptural things for myself when I've had free time, little kind of sculptural drawings. I mean, I call them drawings, so they're little maquette things that I would never show. But for me, each stage of my painting comes so slow. It's such a process of like getting to an image, finding a color, that it's just, I think it's going to happen. It's just going to take a while.
Mhm. Yeah, and we've seen such an incredible evolution through the current exhibition of your work that I'm really excited to see these new paintings and kind of see what the future holds.
Thanks.
We have a question, actually, Antonia had a great question about, are there things in particular that support your creative practice or that offer you inspiration that you kind of use in your practice?
Yeah, I think recently I've been really inspired by like how many artists are dealing with birth, like Clarity Haynes' show that was just on view. I actually got one of the paintings, but birthing painting. Carmen Winant, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. Another mother who's dealing with images of birth. I don't know, it's just very inspiring to see other artists dealing with the subject matter. You asking about inspirations, yeah?
Yeah.
I think he's also thinking if you use any tools in the studio like music.
Like actual things. I listen to like kind of intense podcasts. I don't listen to music. I listen to Ezra Klein, Pod Save America. I'm like drowning in the depression of the environmental disaster that's about to come and the wars that were. I'm like dealing with like taking on too much information while I'm painting. But I do not listen to music. I'm inspired by like getting to go and listen to the next New York Times daily.
Well, I mean, I think everything in life, kind of impacts the work that we do. So it completely makes sense to absorb, media and all of these things in ways to kind of help think about issues, right? And to delve into creative practice. Oftentimes making things is a way of kind of working through the hardest things that we're thinking about, right? So,
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot of sci-fi. I
right.
recently just, you know,
Mhm.
did a book on tape of Vagina Obscura, like all of these kinds of sci-fi as of a way of like processing like visions of like how the earth, this is like a whole nother part of me that I could get into, but Kim Stanley Robinson's like way that he processes like future worlds with like real scientific like facts about what's going to happen with global warming. I think that's like actually really inspires me to kind of process my own experience of being in the world.
Mhm.
And Lo, you have a pretty, because you're a mother, you have a pretty structured studio schedule. I
So
mean,
structured. Yes,
right.
right now I'm kind of a little off because I'm not sleeping so well, but yes, I try to get here by 9:30, do my exercises, and then work until 6.
Yeah, you're almost like a 9 to 5 day
Yeah,
desk job.
I'm a 9 to 5 painter. I like, for my brain, the way my brain works,
Mhm.
I have to have that kind of structure.
I
I
have
started that practice before I had kids.
Yeah, I mean, and the way that you make your work, because it goes from these pastel drawings and then interpreted through digitally scanned and on iPads, and then you build up the surfaces, and then the surfaces are prepared, and then you paint on that. I mean, it's almost like an assembly, the way that you assembly line, like the way that you kind of, it's very structured and your environment.
Yeah, my brain, and I figured out that that's how my brain feels the most calm in terms of like understanding how a piece is evolving and what I'm getting out of it, what's not happening in it. I need to take those steps for
Mhm.
me. You know what I mean? Like, our brains are each wired differently. And in a way, our practices and what we do in our jobs, like, are a reflection of that.
Mm. I have one more question for you, Loie, from the audience. What advice would you give to emerging painters, and maybe specifically painters that are trying to make it in New York right now?
I think it's been the same since I was in here in 2007. I think like you need a community, attach yourself to a group, try and get into connections with artist run spaces, um, places that are kind of like word of mouth, community organized. And those people that kind of run these things, the artists that are participating in that, like they go on to kind of become more and more successful. You know what I mean? Some of them are going to become curators, some of them are going to become successful artists. And then those connections like pull you along as you grow in your career. Yeah, I think just like creating a community is the most important part. And like, even though for me, it's always been torture, but like going and doing studio visits and kind of keeping a dialogue going with people you're really interested in, like reaching out, DMing artists that you are like on a similar plan with, not someone who's like super successful, who knows what their studio time schedule is, but like someone at your stage whose work you like, DM them and like make a connection with them and like move up from there. Even if it's not like your direct community, like it's your community you see on Instagram, artists that you could actually reach out to.
Right. That's great advice. The longer that I'm working at the Aldrich, the smaller the art community becomes. You really realize that everyone is so connected. So that's
Yeah.
fantastic. I think those were all of our questions from our audience.
Can I ask one last question? Is that okay?
Yeah.
I just wanted to know, Loie, what it was like, because there's so many different bodies of work in this exhibition that have never been together, shown together, and what that was like for you. And do you think that has changed your mind at all with what you're doing in the studio? Or not changed, but has had any impact or after effect?
Well, I know with you, I expressed my hesitancy to seeing all of these works together. And I have to confess, I still feel like the works are quite different. I love seeing them all together because I think it's interesting. It's interesting to know that on a kind of a commercial level, people have been okay with me transitioning, with me moving through different experiments. Like there's people out there who are interested in artists evolving, and that makes me very happy. Like this work has all been received in different levels by different kind of communities of collectors, but people have been engaged with looking at it, and I love that. But for me, it still seems very like I see how they moved into each other, but they're just so different. Perhaps with more time, I will see the similarities even more. But I think that's really good for me to have this happen, to kind of realize it's okay. Everything's okay.
I know you were really
It's
hesitant.
all gonna be okay.
Yeah. Well, and you'll get to see it again in a different iteration when it travels to VCU, your alma mater at the ICA. So in a different, I mean, it'll be the same works, but in quite a different architecture and a different, installation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, it is nice actually to see how color has I know color is very important to me. I know that kind of drives my practice, but it is nice to see like throughout this time, like the investigation of color doesn't leave. Like that kind of has been the driving force throughout all of it. And that kind of centers me and thinking like, okay, that is something that I'll always have. No matter what direction I take, like it's going to center on an investigation of color.
Yeah, color, light, and you.
Yeah.
I feel like is the consistent, not necessarily as we were talking about abstract work, some of the work is quite abstract, almost, almost like pure abstraction, but there's still this felt color. So because it's felt by you and your experience in the world.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Is like, it's okay if I do some great, I think, going back to the sculpture thing, when I really think like, why haven't I been able to figure it out? It really has been because of this reason. Like my experience is about, like you're saying, Amy, you've picked it up. Like it's about this felt color, and that happens in the process of like putting the color down, feeling the color, responding to that color I put down with the next movement on the painting. Like it's structured in the drawing, but then it happens again when I make it into a painting. And I think with sculpture, I have not figured out like how can I turn that without making like an Anish Kapoor, like how can I turn, which if I could just make Anish Kapoor sculpture, yes. Or a Terrell, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or Irwin, like if I could just go ahead and copy that, then I would figure out how to make sculpture, but I haven't figured out how to do that in my own kind of voice. But yeah, like how do I make sculpture leading with color? I don't know.
You will. You're going to figure it out. I know it.
So rather than just like making an object and then coloring it, like putting color on it. I don't know. This is like, I think about that probably like once a day. How can I formalize this into sculpture?
I think you're going to figure it out. I see you getting closer, even in the way that you're discussing it. You just have to it's just time. Luckily you're young. You have a lot more time.
I hope so.
You do.
And we will all be very excited to see it once that happens.
Okay.
Loie, thank you so much. And I hope you have a very good night's sleep tonight.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Thanks for finding the time to do this too. We really appreciate it. I know you're very busy right now. So thanks so much.
I'm not, I just need to sleep. Then I'll be fine.
Thank you so much to everyone who's joined us this evening. And thank you again, Amy and Loie. Truly, thank you. It was a wonderful, wonderful peek into your mind.